The Archdiocese of Chicago is a vibrant and diverse faith community. We celebrate our faith through worship, evangelization, and reaching out to the needy. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Good morning, welcome to Catholic Chicago on WNDZ, 750 AM. You can also get us on youtube.com/Catholic Chicago, youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. I'm Father Greg Sakowitz, Director of Holy Name Cathedral in Chicago. And to my left, great friend, co-host, Mark Teresi, who is leading our 175th and 150th anniversaries of the Cathedral, plus many other hats that Mark happens to wear. So good morning, Mark. How are you?
Good morning. Very good. 175th, November 24th is our kickoff Mass, 12:30 Mass. We'll have a little reception afterwards. So that's the beginning of the year, and it will be a wonderful year of celebrating.
And followed by the following November, 150 years.
Celebrating the cathedral itself, the building itself, rebuilt after the Chicago fire. That'll be a citywide celebration.
It's amazing talking about the 175th, the 150th, how quickly this summer is flying.
Oh.
Talk about time moving. Here we are into August. It was just Memorial Day, July 4th. We're going to blink, it'll be Labor Day. And the White Sox keep losing, and the Cubs are not doing too much better, but we have the Bears coming up.
Two games into last place as we speak.
Yeah, and for the White Sox, it was totally expected, but not this bad. And for the Cubs, very disappointing. But we have a great program lined up here on Catholic Chicago on WNDZ 750. Backed by popular demand once again, Dr. Edward Gordon, writer, author, historian, researcher, great friend, very active at Cathedral, beautiful wife Elaine. So Dr. Edward Gordon, welcome to the program this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
It's always great to have you back. And how are you doing, Ed?
I'm fine, thank you.
And how's Elaine doing?
She's all right.
Yeah. And you've been to Cathedral for how many years?
41.
41 years.
This is our 41st wedding anniversary, August 6th.
Oh, happy anniversary.
We were married in the chapel at Holy Name in 1983.
We had the big celebration a year ago.
That's right, it was 40.
For your 40th.
That's right.
That's right.
Well, it took two priests to have us renew our marriage vows.
Really?
They had to hold me.
Tom Franzman?
Yes, that's right. And you. Yeah.
Elaine wasn't questioning the vows at all.
No. But I almost fainted, you know. So.
We're 43 years, August 16th. So
There you go. All
41.
right.
Doesn't it go fast?
Yeah, August is a popular month.
And it goes
And I was
very
45, a priest, last May. So we're all in our 40s. But
You look better than the day you were ordained.
You look more.
Please check your
relaxed.
glasses. My brothers have got wavy hair. It's waving goodbye.
Just so you know, my wife, 43 years, she said 37 of the best years of her life.
I like
I'm
that
not
one.
going to ask anything about
We have a great
now.
program lined
Yes.
up. 4 parts, 4 segments. We're going to kind of toss it over to you, Edward. Part number 1, the 3 historic ages define truth.
So we're talking about history, the church, and the current moral crisis. You know, the concept of defining truth today is very difficult for most people. You know, the fundamental issues facing the Catholic Church today is this cultural crisis, because the church is not part of the popular culture, but it lives in that cultural envelope as well. And our culture is a sum total of customs and institutions, and it's the criteria for which people help to understand what is the truth, because they want to know what to believe and who to follow. And Western civilization has gone through 3 different eras. If you can show the first slide now, if you would, let's talk about it.
And we'll explain it for folks listening on the
That's
radio.
right. So if you look at the slide, you see there are 3 eras. First was the pre-modern era, which is from Christ to about 1500. And it was based on authority. In ancient times, a classical period, you had Plato and Aristotle, who were considered important philosophers. And in the Christian era, of course, we have Christ, the Bible, Revelation, the Pope, and the handling down of authority and truth through those issues. People base their lives. Then around the time of the Reformation, around 1500 to 1970, we had science. Theory, hypothesis gave you truths, all right? The scientific method defined truth, all right? If you believe that, religion then just became sort of like a hobby on the side, an art form. It was no longer the center stage for many people. Authority was challenged, whether or not.
This is during the modern time.
This is during modern time. This was the second era.
Okay.
All right. Now, however, we're in the third era, which is postmodernism. And what is this? Well, after the Second World War, Europe was in ruins. Europe had gone through 2 world wars. It had been totally destroyed again by 1945. French philosophers came up with the concept of postmodernism, which was a rejection of fascism, communism, and capitalism. And what they basically said is, what we're going to do is we're going to deconstruct every idea and concept, and it can be broken down into simple parts. It was a pragmatic approach to everything. So, in other words, if it can be easily verified, it's true. If it isn't easily verified, then I can't believe it. Now science, because science keeps changing, I mean, how many times you read in the newspaper, well, let's see, if you drink 2 glasses of wine, it's okay, or it's 1 glass of wine, or maybe you shouldn't drink any wine. Well, they keep giving you new studies. So now that undermines science. Is aspirin good for you? Should you take aspirin or shouldn't you take aspirin? All right. So now the resulting philosophy.
Now that part is very true, because you get, one study says vegetables great for you. Also another study comes out and says vegetables not good for you.
Exactly.
Right. So what postmodernism says is each individual must construct their own truth. And it's based on your personal experiences, your story. This is a very pragmatic approach to information. So let's explain that a little further. According to the postmodernists, there are multiple truths. Maybe you've heard that after the last election, people were starting to talk about alternative truth. All right? So basically, there is no truth. There is no moral compass. Now, nihilism for the 19th century basically preached the same thing, where the nihilists rejected philosophy, theology, etc. And there's no right or wrong. So the postmodernist says there is no moral code. You impose your truth on another person, you're a bigot. So if you try to tell me what to do, I say to you, well, I'm a left-handed redhead. You aren't, so don't tell me what to do, all right? So don't be judgmental. Everything is relative. So if you are practice religion, well, you can have faith, but it's private. It's a private matter. You should not discuss it in public, only in church. It has no, in other words, it has no role in society. So there are really 3 horsemen of this contemporary moral apocalypse, which is causing all this confusion. One is this postmodernist idea, the deconstruction of all philosophy, history, religion, theology, and then what I call a mixture of nihilism and anarchism. I'll explain that in a minute.
Now, hold on for a second there, Edward.
Yeah.
And that is, so what you're saying is, as we have moved through these different eras, and now we're in postmodernism, where does our Catholic faith fit into this whole model?
That's that's the last part here. That's the solution, all right? Because
that's part 4.
That's part 4.
Okay,
I'm just trying to explain why right now people have this sense of confusion in general. They don't know who to trust anymore.
No, that part is very true.
They don't know what's right or wrong. And if you're not part of their tribe, They distrust every other tribe, all right?
And there are very many venues to receive messages immediately.
Well, right.
Compared to years ago.
Well, and there's many, we're going to talk about propaganda and conspiracy theory. We're going to talk about that a little bit later this morning.
Good.
But so basically, what postmodernism says, I believe what I can deduce, or the truth is only what I can personally accept from my own experience. That is my truth.
So is that narcissism?
It's postmodernism. No, narcissism is basically a part of it because it all becomes me, myself, and I.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, it sounds like individualism in terms of...
Extreme individualism. That's right. So they reject as irrelevant all history, all theology, all philosophy. The past is useless. So history is useless.
Wow.
All history. And the future, don't worry about it. Live for today.
So you're saying postmodernism, the past is useless.
So it's really a mixture of three things. Nihilism, there is no truth. Anarchism, there's no law. And atheism, there is no God. All right? So that's
the foundation.
That's what's going on in our society now. Now, most people have never even heard of postmodernism. All right? So that's why I'm trying to break it down into its component parts, so people can say, yeah, you know, I sort of see that on television. I sort of see that. Now, we've always had divisions. Don't get me wrong. One newspaper is Democrat, another newspaper is Republican. These things have always occurred. But right now, what you have is postmodernists, they're trying to rewrite history to empower their own prejudices. So you see, I'm on the Grant Parks Monument Commission, and they wanted to remove Lincoln from Grant Park.
Because it's named Grant Park? Or
No, because he was a bigot. He didn't believe in racial equality. Therefore, he should be removed. Now, at the time when Lincoln lived in the 1860s, very few Americans believed blacks and whites should be equal.
Right.
And he fought very hard in the end for the amendment to change that, to end slavery and to emancipate blacks.
Right.
But people still had tremendous racial prejudices. Even in the North, before the Civil War, freed blacks were treated abominably, all right? So what we're talking about is you can't take today's prejudices, morality, and project it on the past. If you do that, well, I'll give you an example. There's one politician that recently removed the statue of George Washington from outside his office because George Washington had slaves.
Oh, wow.
All right? Now, if you do that as a historian, I could probably run down every hero you could think of, including current. All right? All right?
Because nobody's perfect.
That is historical, that is called historical presentism. You take and you project that on the past.
We can also do that with church leaders.
Well, you can do that with anyone.
If
So
you take that attitude, then it's very individualistic, and
Well,
there's no foundation.
but now you see this in our country from the people on the extreme left and the extreme right. They're using this to change history.
Yeah?
Yes.
All right, and that's wrong. So teaching of history is wider. It has to be based on facts and abandoning ideological extremism. All right? But you need to base it on the facts of that era. What was going on then? 10 years from now, I promise you, many of the heroes of today will no longer be worshipped. Now, you could take an extreme example and say, well, what about the pop music stars from 10 years ago? Well, a few of them are still around, but most of them have faded out of existence, right?
Exactly.
That part's
All right.
true.
So
Now,
another
time out,
aspect.
Edward, we've actually come to the end of the first quarter of
Okay.
this football game.
All right.
So, Mark, take it to break.
Sure. WNDZ, 7:50 a.m., Catholic Chicago. You can go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. We're with Dr. Edward E. Gordon, historian, researcher, author, professor, analyst, friend of Holy Name. And our next session, we're going to talk about the crisis of truth. Please stay tuned. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Community is core to Catholic Charity's founding mission. For more than 100 years, we have met people and families where they are, serving anyone in need, regardless of their faith, gender, race, or ethnicity. As our world absorbs the economic, political, and social aftershocks of the pandemic, 50% or more of the 6 million people living in Cook and Lake counties have little or no savings. They are a paycheck away from zero. We are deeply grateful to everyone in the Catholic Charities community who partners with us to alleviate the suffering of the people we serve and offer them a better path forward. We are witnessing a message of mercy and hope to a world very much in need. Learn more at CatholicCharities.net.
I feel special. I feel great. I got good grades.
We've seen a huge surge in our kids now meeting or exceeding grade level. Come check us out. You may have never thought we were an option before.
Our school communities provide students with academic excellence and character education in a supportive and stable learning environment. Come see for yourself. Visit archchicago.org/findaschool.
We're back, WNDZ, 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. You can go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago with Dr. Edward E. Gordon. We found out during break, Edward's Happy E. Earl means warrior, so our Happy Warrior will begin our next section.
Happy Warrior Gordon.
Oh, God.
Crisis of Truth.
The crisis of truth. Well, if we look at our second slide, basically what that slide shows us, the church authority comes from Christ and revelation through then the Pope, the bishops, to the faithful. But postmodernism and deconstructionism basically says no. It's presentism and positivism. It's anti-tradition, anti-authority, anti-expert, anti-individual truth only. In fact, lately there's been a very heightened attack on so-called quote-unquote experts, that they're not expert in anything. I remember I had a student one time came up and they said, my opinion is just as good as yours.
That you're what?
My opinion, the student's opinion, is just, and I said, well, you can have your opinion, but the reason you're here is that supposedly I'm an expert in a field and I'm trying to give you new information for you to guide that, all right?
You're trying to push that down and say that my opinion is equal to yours.
Right.
Then
Even
why
though he
do-
has no foundation
No.
or no knowledge,
No.
just his thoughts. His,
Right.
And why was he in the class then?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. It would be as if I said to my students, I don't believe in grading, so I'll give you all automatic A's. I had a teacher who did that to me in a college course, and many of us were at that time working, I was, and at the end we had a petition and we objected to this because we were paying good money, and that professor was fired. He was an adjunct. He was not a full tenured professor because that's wrong.
And you were working
But there is
hard.
there is this idea of a common denominator, that everything should be reduced to this common denominator. All right? And if you don't do that, it's not fair, it's not just. So, what is the impact then of postmodernism on religion? It's trying to do that. It's trying to reduce everything to a common denominator. I'm not religious, but I'm mindful. I am not religious, but I am spiritual. Well, what does that mean? Well, basically, the postmodernists say all religion are based on myths, and therefore one is as good as another. All right? Now, postmodernists claim that their personal experience gives them something called transcendent knowledge for themselves.
Explain that.
Transcendent knowledge? Well, it's my experience going through life, testing what is truth, and therefore my truth is transcendent for me. all right? I don't need anyone to tell me what's right or wrong. So, you know.
Edward, let me ask you this, what you just said.
Yes.
If that's what's happening in our country, in our society today, what do people use as a point of reference?
That's a good question. See, that's why many people in our CIA that I've taught for the last 20 years in the history, many of them say they want to become Catholics because they need a moral compass, because they
find the Catholic Church as a point of reference. You know, I'll give you an example, and that is, I'm sure all of us have driven to the state of Wisconsin at some point. Even though I don't like the Packers, I've driven to the state of Wisconsin. And as you go to a side road or, you know, a rest area, there's always a map of Wisconsin. What I always find fascinating, the map says with an arrow, "You are here." And I love that because I'm very visual, and that map tells me where I've come from, let's say Chicago, to this spot here in Wisconsin, and the map continues to go further north, you know, Minocqua, Eagle River, whatever. But I always find those maps in Wisconsin, the arrow, "You are here," is a tremendous point of reference to help and guide me from where I've been, where I'm now, and moving toward. But what you're talking about, there is no point of reference.
Well, the point, in other words, their life story is so different from everyone else's story that they're not bound by anyone else's rules. All right? So
where's the common denominator?
Tribes. Other people that believe like you do.
Oh.
And
now that has become very dangerous.
Well, that's what we see all across our country right now. That is our culture. Tribalism is very big. It would be as if I said to you, I only believe in other left-handed redheads. Now, my hair used to be a lot redder than this guy's, okay? And if you aren't a left-handed redhead, I don't believe you. I don't care if you're the Pope. I'm not going to listen to you, all right? So what we see now is...
We are broken into camps today.
We're broken into camps.
And if you're not part of the camp, you're the enemy.
That is correct.
And also, there's no discussion. It turns into a fierce fight.
Correct. It would be as if I said, look, I'm going to go into a movie theater. In the middle of the show, I'm going to get up and shout, "Fire." And I have a right to do that. And no one can stop me. All right? So why is there so much violence in our society? Well, someone did me wrong, and I have the right to correct it any way I feel like it, all right? And then I can plead various reasons why I did that. And there's less and less trust in authority. It's very interesting. You see on television, judges, and I won't mention the one, who has these court hearings. Very popular show, correct? People want punishment. They want justice, right? But they don't want you to tell them what is right or wrong. But they're fascinated in these murder trials and court cases that you constantly see in the press and in the news. And it shows the yearning people do have for someone to define right or wrong, all right? And it shouldn't be based on an opinion poll, but a lot of times it is. So,
and it does, excuse me, and that approach does impact society.
That's correct.
In terms of how they see reality. Right. That's not real, but it's real for people then.
So who is defining reality? Well, now the Supreme Court used to define reality here. Now there are people that are doubting the Supreme Court, all right? Of course, if the Supreme Court defines morality, then why is it that the Supreme Court upheld slavery for a long, long, long time, all right? And it also upheld abortion for a long, long, long time. So we have to always say to ourselves, what authority are we going to listen to? And what should it be? What facts back up this, all right?
So we're dealing with today an incredible slippery slope.
Yes.
And no rock foundation.
Correct. I mean, when you think of the last...
That's from a societal point of view.
Yes. And when you think of the last 30 years, the Kennedy assassination or more, the Kennedy assassination, the war in Vietnam, the Watergate, you look at all of this and you can see this gradual confusion getting bigger and bigger across society, where people don't believe authority figures anymore.
And they're desensitized to a lot of these issues.
Right.
Every day you're seeing this stuff, and all of a sudden it doesn't become as severe as it should be in terms of our assessment.
Correct.
It's all becoming very subjective.
Yeah.
Right. Now, in this country,
And that's very dangerous.
in this republic that we live in, remember, our government operates on a consensus basis. That's how it was founded, all right? It's not a parliamentarian government, so that there's always been tremendous rivalries between Democrats and Republicans and other political parties, all right? I mean, in past elections in the 19th century, there would be riots on State Street where the Democrat and Republican followers would meet at State and Madison and start fighting each other and throwing rocks and bottles. So there's always been dissension. But the Congress worked on the concept of joint resolutions, where they would come together on issues and try to work things out. That's not true anymore. Now we have tribalism, where both sides see that the only future is to destroy the other side. And now I think Americans are tired of this, many of them. Not all of them. Some people do look for simplistic solutions that come out of this postmodernist ilk, all right? But it has a tremendous impact on religion, because now if postmodernism will not tolerate religious participation in the marketplace. So Catholic charities can no longer have adoptions because it will not allow certain people to adopt children. So they are prohibited. The church is shut out from that, all right, based on the current law, all right? That is a good example of what I'm talking about. But there are others. Now remember, the United States was sterilizing people who were handicapped in the 1920s to the 1970s. That's where the eugenic laws of sterilization that the Nazis had came from our laws.
Wow.
And it took to the 1970s for us to stop doing this, all right? So I want to point out that the concept of morality and freedom in our country is very, very fragile and can be easily destroyed, all right? And postmodernism now is undermining some of the fundamental concepts that our republic was founded on, and because of that is also infringing on religious freedom.
On that note, we need to bring it to break. We are now at halftime of this tremendous discussion and insights from Dr. Edward Gordon. Mark, take us to break.
Sure. WNDZ, 7:50 a.m., Catholic Chicago. Go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago with Dr. Edward E. Gordon. He was a historian, researcher, professor, analyst, author,
Great friend.
Friend of Holy Name. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about that lack of trust and truth within our society. We'll be back in a few minutes. Please stay tuned.
I am a seminarian.
The Church needs compassionate and well-trained priests to help guide each of us through life.
What inspires me, what draws me always to the priesthood is continue to see priests be a beacon of hope for other people.
You can play a part in the education of these young men as they prepare for a life of service to others.
I want to be that beacon of hope too, and it sets my heart on fire.
To support our seminarians, make your gift at archchicago.org/seminarian fund or call 312-534-7959.
The cemetery ministry is a core ministry of our Catholic faith tied to the corporal works of mercy. It's comforting to know that our Catholic cemeteries are caring for the remains of our loved ones awaiting the resurrection. There are 44 Archdiocese of Chicago Catholic cemeteries willing to help you in your time of loss. Call 708-449-6100 or visit CatholicCemeteriesChicago.org. Catholic Cemeteries, serving the Catholic community since 1837.
You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Thanks for letting us be part of your morning. Now again, Catholic Chicago.
We're back, WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. You can go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago with Dr. Edward E. Gordon. Once I had said before, historian, researcher, author. Today, really tremendous presentation on how do we see ourselves as a society, not only as church, but as a secular
And
people.
where do we fit in?
Right, and where do we fit in?
Right.
And you're going to talk about a lack of trust and truth within our society now.
Yes. Well, right now there's a lot of deception going on. We all see it. Conspiracies. And postmodernists proclaim that they're an effort to right wrongs, to overcome conspiracies and injustices. Or is it really an individual's right to freedom no matter what the rule of law has said? What is it? All right? I mean, more and more people talk about freedom, but they overlook responsibility and they overlook the impact of what they're doing and saying on other people.
I would like the thing that you say, Edward, about people are into freedom, but then when comes freedom, there's actions and there's consequences.
There's responsibility.
And responsibility.
Now,
and people want part one, but not part two.
I want you to think now about this very carefully. Who do you really trust today among the people you know? Think about that. Mm-hmm. The level of trust among the public has declined tremendously. I remember when Cardinal Bernardine was accused of being a pedophile by a seminarian. And I was walking down Michigan Avenue, coming back to my office, and there was a news crew on Michigan Avenue near the Chancery office where the Cardinal was, and all the trucks were out there. And this guy came up and he said, well, do you think Cardinal Bernardine is a pedophile? And I said to him, I've met Cardinal Bernardine, I know him, and there's no way in which he is a pedophile. And the guy ran away, and he came up to this other guy and asked, he said, well, maybe, who knows? Right.
That's the soundbite they used.
Correct, not me.
Right.
So, the breakdown of public morality has resulted in this lack of trust. Experts can't be trusted, laws are tainted, everything is rigged, there is no truth. Everything that happens is someone has rigged this. I remember when we landed on the moon in 1969, this crazy thing came out that it was false. They did it in the studio. Now, that had some followers, but not many. Today, look at COVID. There are 500 sites preaching lies about COVID, all right? And yet many people believe that. If you take and you say a lie over and over and over again, and this is something that the Nazis first realized. Dr. Joseph Goebbels, who had a PhD in literature, came up with this concept. And the bigger the lie, the better, and the more you had multimedia, and then it was radio and newspapers, magazines, and speeches, with their idol Adolf, the more people might believe this.
Well, Edward, talk about the landing on the moon in '69, where some felt it was fake, it was done in the desert. You have a group of people that thought the concentration camps in World War II did not exist.
Correct.
I can't fathom how a human being could say there was all propaganda.
Anti-Semitism was very rife. Remember, we would not let many Jews into the United States that were fleeing from Europe. No one else would either.
But to deny the Holocaust, to deny the concentration camps was all acted out, and yet those millions of people who went to their death were those that survived with the markings on the arm.
But remember, many religions taught that the Jews were Christ killers.
Yeah,
and it was not until the Second Vatican Council that we apologized for that, and the Pope started going to Jewish services and trying to end that. Why do we have a record number of guns in our country? Why?
That people are using.
Yeah, but why do we have so many guns? One of the reasons, the danger's all around us. The police will not protect you. The blue helmets of the UN are going to take over the United States. Or some militia group is going to threaten you. So there's this lack of trust now in society that has reached tremendous levels. You can see it in the news. So the postmodernists have led this overwhelming feeling of helplessness, hopelessness, and anger. And people feel this now. The levels of drug addiction, alcoholism, and suicides, particularly among younger people, is very high right now because religion, authority, the definition of right and wrong. So you see all of this bizarre behavior in groups. Look at the weird people who have done outrageous things, and they always ask the same thing. Why did this person do this terrible thing? People want to know, well, what motivated them? This is what's motivating many people who have, and many of them have other problems. I'm not saying they don't, but now, so what happens to society when its leadership is overpowered by postmodernist principles? And that's how they basically now try to get support for what they do. They take unachievable, grandiose plans, and they lead classes of people into warfare with others. They make statements that are radically wrong, and they know they're wrong, and they won't work. But they still get people to believe in that. And they have very narrow goals that have derailed something that we used to call, when I was a child, quote unquote, public morality. People didn't do these things in public.
Yeah.
Now, where does the media fit into this kind of thinking, in your opinion?
Well, there's always been yellow press in this United States, all right?
For the Spanish yellow press.
The Spanish-American War, when the Maine blew up, William Randolph Hearst said, "You provide me with the headline and I'll produce the war." All right? So there's always been sensationalistic garbage. That this politician's wife had babies with people from Mars. Abraham Lincoln was accused of having a black mistress and black children in the White House in 1864. So these types of distortions.
Was that actually rumored?
Yeah, yes.
I never heard that one.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Wow.
Yes. So you have narrow goals that can derail public morality. And it could be economic goals, moral goals, all right? People lose sight of what I call the big picture: social cohesion, community activism, where I'm talking about full, I do a lot of work in labor relations. I think you know that, where I try to get people in communities, businesses, nonprofits, school systems, to improve the quality of education and training for adults and for students, all right? That takes community action. It takes people who have seen themselves as rivals to work together. This undermines that. Collaboration, tolerance, self-sacrifice, these are dirty words. When have you heard a politician call for people to make self-sacrifice? What about John Kennedy in his inaugural speech when he said, you know, don't ask, what can you do for your country? Don't ask what your country is going to do for you. I'd like to see a politician try that again. They wouldn't even think it.
And why?
Because collaboration versus confrontation. And we are in the confrontation mode. Our society is confrontation, all right? Teamwork is avoided. Self is everything. It's a do-it-now culture. How? How about this? Niccolo Machiavelli, the ends justify the means.
Yeah.
If I have to kill 13 or 6 million Jews and 5 million others in order to make the German Aryan race #1, what's the problem with it?
Right.
The ends justify the means. It's us versus them. That was the Nazi thinking, and that's where we are at today. It's us versus them.
So I think of our grandkids, that next, it's 2 generations from where we are. What kind of a world are they walking into?
Well, it's taking all religion out of daily community life. It is telling us that you can only practice your religion in church and not in society. And that is what we need to alert Catholics to from the pulpit, because this is a direct threat to our religious freedom.
See, here's the thing. You can't practice religion in a vacuum. To say that I'll be religious and holy that 1 hour in church, but outside the exit doors, all bets are off.
Tell that little story about the kid.
Yeah, this is actually a true story. A priest some years ago gave to a group of 4th graders a complete tour of the church. Showed them the tabernacle, the sanctuary, the vestments, the stained glass windows, the confessionals, the altar, behind the scenes, everything, the windows, up and down. At the end of the tour, the priest asked the 4th graders, okay, boys and girls, what's been the most important thing you've seen on this tour? And the little boy said, the exit sign. And the priest thought the kid was being a jerk and said, okay, Charlie, why was the exit sign the most important thing you saw on this tour? And the little boy said, well, Father, if we listen to the Word of God from the readings and receive Holy Communion, at the end of Mass, we now go outside those exit doors to live it. And the priest thought, whoa. Where he thought the kid was being a jerk, the exit sign, the most important thing, so I can get out of here and get rid of you. Yeah. During that presentation, the little boy, the wheels are spinning, thinking, connecting. And he said, if we take the Word of God seriously from the readings and receive Holy Communion, at the end of Mass, now go live it. The priest was awed by the insight of a little 10-year-old boy.
And that's a great lead-in to our last section of this program.
And on that note,
time for a break.
Okay,
Mark.
WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. You can go to youtube.com/Catholic Chicago with Dr. Edward E. Gordon, historian, researcher, professor, author. And in our next segment, he's going to talk about outreach and evangelization. Our theme, our vision at Holy Name is a world in communion with Jesus Christ. We'll talk about what do you see as the solutions. Right. We'll be back in a few minutes. Please stay tuned.
And put a stop to all those expenses that go along with owning a car, we will gratefully accept your donation, whether the car is running or not. You choose a pickup time that is convenient for you, and we will make the donation as easy as possible free of charge. You'll receive a charitable donation receipt as well. We accept all types of vehicles nationwide, and you will know that your donation is made to Catholic Charities, an agency you can trust. To learn more about donating your car, call 877-786-4483. That's 877-786-4483. Thank you.
This is year 44 for me teaching. When I started here, there were teachers here that had taught me when I was a student. Now I'm the old person. Right now, I teach junior high math. I love when kids find what I'm teaching to be fun and they get it. I see that light bulb go off and it's a thrill. People are always amazed. What? You're here for 44 years? It's hard for me to believe, frankly. I love what I do. Every summer I think, oh, I miss the classroom. Even on the weekends, I think I can't wait to get back on Monday and teach those quadratic equations.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
We're back, WNDZ 750 AM, Catholic Chicago. Go to youtube.com/CatholicChicago. We're with Dr. Edward E. Gordon, historian, researcher, author, analyst, good friend of Holy Name, author. Did I say author? I hope I did.
Yes.
And as we
20
look
books.
as we look at this next section, it made me think of something which I'll just share real quick. We're talking about outreach and evangelism, our theme at Holy Name,
Right.
A World in Communion with Jesus Christ. What's the solution? Remember years ago in the parish, we were talking about working with young people, and we wanted to go, our people insisted on going to this church that was very dynamic, not a Catholic church, because that's the solution. Mm-hmm. And we were walking around with a young lady that gave us a tour of their church, and she came up to me on the side and said, you know, I'm taking instruction from Father, I'll just say Father Pat, to be a Catholic. I said, but you're here. Why? And she said, well, because they don't have the Eucharist, and the Eucharist is center to what I believe. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow.
Interesting.
So as we talk outreach, evangelism, and Eucharist, we just had a huge celebration in Indianapolis. Right. Edward, all yours.
Part 4.
Okay. Well, so postmodernism then is this assault on our secular culture and also on all religion, not just the Catholic Church. Because postmodernism is really not about the free exercise of equal rights. It really is a rejection of the practice of public morality across U.S. society that has been developed over the past 240 years. That's what we're dealing with now. It's a perversion of what we have believed to help us define the truth.
So is it a conscious rejection, or is it a pattern of behavior that leads you to rejection?
Both. It's a conscious rejection by the people who preach it, and then it is just what is occurring because it is swept across the whole world now. All right, tremendous distrust. So instead, postmodernism is proclaiming really a new form of anarchy. It's undermining the Constitution and the rule of law in our country. And nihilism, the denial of the value of history and philosophy and theology, is certainly undermining religious beliefs. Instead, we're offering a brew of deception, divisiveness, narcissism, propaganda, setting groups against groups across society. And this is really tribalism run wild. We are really destroying the social glue that's holding this society together. And we see that more and more. Now people are talking about danger of a civil war breaking out in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And even separate from that, going to dinner with friends and all of a sudden you can't, in a dignified way, discuss your
Correct.
Differences.
Yes, yes. Well, because people are not really looking at the quality of the information or the prejudices they have, and where and how that came to be.
I'll take one step further. I know 3 families that the rule in the house is, this is the honest to God truth, when we have our Christmas party and the whole family gets together, you can talk about anything you want. You may not talk politics.
Right.
If you bring up politics, on Christmas Day you are asked to leave the house because fights have broken out at the Christmas party.
Yeah, right, right.
Oh, yeah.
So the church and the popes really are working to try to teach one integrated concept of the relationship between faith and reason, and an integrated concept of the spiritual concept of world history. So this is very countercultural in today's popular non-traditionalist society, because people think history is bunk. And in fact, if you don't understand the history of the Catholic Church, you can't understand the dogmas and doctrines of the Church and how they have evolved. People today often believe that knowledge of the past is useless, and to understand the present or to prepare for the future.
You know, that is very scary when people say knowledge of the past is useless, and we're just going to repeat the same mistakes over and over again.
Yes.
What's the great law? The thing is, you learn from the past and build into the future.
Well, he who does not know, a person that does not know history is doomed to relive it. And when you ignore the past, you lose perspective. And that's what we're losing today, and how societies evolve and grow or became self-destructive. So this fails to address the consequences of excluding religious influence and public morality and the rule of law. As I pointed out earlier before the broadcast, the idea of slavery, eugenics, immigration, abortion, these issues are moral issues. The Supreme Court of the United States does not define my morality as a Roman Catholic, and it never has, and never will, okay? So, the issue of dogma and doctrine, you know, it's not a question of just the rules and regulations. What really is important, not just what we believe, but how we came to believe this. And the church respects other religious beliefs because there's a ray of truth enlightening people in other religions, and we respect that. But we're ecumenical because we are Catholic, which is the basis of dialogue with all other Christians and people of goodwill. And the great teaching of the Second Vatican Council preached that through missionary outreach, a united church could heal the divisions that had occurred in the past. And every pope since then has attempted to do that. So I believe that postmodernism, this age of extreme individualism and narcissistic behavior and overreach, I think people are fed up with it. I think it is reflected now in the particular time that we're going through right now. It's left us with bitterness, division, a surging drug and mental health crisis, and people are nasty to each other. There's confusion in domestic politics and international affairs.
Now, wait, great story. About 30 years ago, I was on retreat with a bunch of priests, and the retreat master asked the priest, he says, "Gentlemen, as you grow older, is life making you better or bitter? And the choice is yours." Well, I really like that.
The church, you know, does not live in cultural isolation. It always has taken shape on the borders of itself and popular culture, and that's true today.
So let me ask you this. From our earlier discussion, you talked about helplessness, hopelessness, and anger.
Yes.
How does the church in this arena of evangelism outreach, how do we move from helplessness, hopelessness, and anger?
Well, we move through it because our faith is not something that we hide behind. It needs to be practiced in the world around us. There was a preacher, holy named Cathedral, who was with a group of second graders preparing to receive Holy Communion. And they went through the cathedral, and afterwards they went back to the classroom with the sister and the priest. And the priest asked them, "Well, who are the saints?" because they had seen the saints in the windows. And this little boy said, the saints are people who God's light comes shining through.
Beautiful.
Now, of course, that's because he saw the saints and the light
And he
coming
saw
through.
the light.
But that is what the church really preaches. So, Christ established the church through the inspired word of God and revelations to humans. But the church is living history. It's the clergy, but it's also the faithful.
Do we have to claim to be saints then?
No. Who's going to, when we end up in heaven, we'll find out if we've been a saint or not.
Okay.
All right?
And I think it's very important. I always tell people, it's not by my priesthood that I'm called to serve. It is by our baptism that we all are called to serve and to be Christ to others. And we all live out our own different charisms through the celibate life priesthood, single life, married life, but then by our baptism we are called to serve in the name of the Lord.
So
I want to talk about the gift of faith and the grace through the sacraments that helps people through their lives.
But just FYI, Greg did want a statue of himself in the cathedral as St. Gregory, and we kind of nixed that.
Mark shut it down.
Well, St. Edward the Confessor of England, where's his statue?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the joke is he went to Mass 3 times a day. That's why he spent more time on his knees than sitting on the throne. Anyway,
interesting.
He built Westminster Abbey.
Did he really?
In London, yes.
Wow.
But the point is, we have this great commitment of love and grace that Christ gave us. And we believe that this vehicle through the church helps us. But we are the church. Now, to what extent do we live our lives that way? All right? You don't have to stand on a street corner with a bullhorn. How do you treat strangers? Mm-hmm. How do you treat your family and friends? Honesty is the greatest talent that anyone can have in their life. It's hard to be honest in your life because people at times don't want to hear the truth. It's not a question of being rude.
But you bring Christ to folks. The hospital ministry is very important to you. You're not telegraphing it. You're being who you are, and Christ is coming through you to those folks. That's a great example to me.
Through my work as a historian, as a writer, as a labor economist, I attempt to tell people the truth based on the research I've done, and I pray every day to understand God's will and then to do it in my own little life.
And the program, I want to thank in a very special way Dr. Edward Gordon, a great friend. This has been a very enlightening program, Edward. I want to thank you for being a guest this morning. I want to thank in a very special way also our producer and engineers, Michael May, Clint Cottrell, to co-host Mark Teresi. Great job as usual. To all of you, may God bless you. Enjoy the gift of summer each day. Enjoy family, friends. Connect to a church. Be part of the faith community. Go to Mass.
Amen.
Amen.